The secret key to winning rookie drafts isn't taking the guy with the highest probability of hitting. The key is taking the player that can be a true league winner and turn into a first-round starter pick. Now, obviously, if you go over to flockfantasy.com, look at the community rankings, you already have the 101, the 102 being priced as first-round starter picks or early second-rounders, right? I mean, we already know Caleb Williams is going to have that price tag day one. Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to have pretty damn close to that price tag day one. But there's someone that I think in the middle of round one of rookie drafts that should be priced similarly that you can actually get at a discount this offseason. This is going to be a video series where I dive into every single prospect as we approach the NFL draft. So of course, if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football, make sure you're subscribed, and we will be updating our rookie rankings over there on flockfantasy.com for everybody that's a part of the flock. But let's go ahead and let's talk about Jayden Daniels, someone who just won the Heisman following Caleb Williams, Bryce Young, Devonta Smith, Joe Burrow, Kyler, Baker, Lamar, Henry, Mariota, Winston, Manziel, RG3, Cam Newton. You're going to notice a couple of these names later on, names like Kyler, Lamar, Cam Newton, RG3. You'll see how relevant they are in just 1 second. But it's hard to say a Heisman winner is going unnoticed, right? I mean, this is a quarterback that just had 3,800 passing yards. He had 40 passing touchdowns. And at the same time, he had 1,100 rushing yards. Now, I'm very excited to go through and watch Jayden Daniels' film. But the reality is, I can't necessarily sit there, turn on YouTube, turn on the TV, and figure out if he's going to be successful from a real-life perspective at the quarterback position by just watching all 22. I would say there's almost nobody on YouTube or anywhere that can do that. We see time and time again, entire NFL organizations that invest millions of dollars into scouting the position, scouting their franchise tag, get that decision wrong. So while I can't come out here and guarantee you that I am some expert quarterback scout and that I know exactly what we're going to see on film, what I can do is I can look into a range of outcomes from a dynasty fantasy football perspective, which obviously is so damn important if that's the game that we are going to play. Now, what I want to do is I want to be looking at where he is going to go in the NFL draft. What does his rushing upside mean for his overall upside in fantasy, and also potential landing spots and if he could succeed in those spots. So with Jayden Daniels, this is a quarterback that was projected initially to be more so a mid-round one pick, at least what I saw earlier in the year. Now he has risen where on NFL mock draft database, he is currently projected to be the 5th pick off the board. Now, of course, we're not going to sit here and say this is a guarantee. There's a long offseason to play out, but if Jayden Daniels is going to be around this range, that is a massive boost to his value, because what we've historically seen is quarterbacks that are selected inside the top 5 picks are given every opportunity to succeed year in and year out, even if they are trash, even if they are Zach Wilson, even if they are Blake Bortles, even if they are Mitchell Trubisky. If you're a top 5 pick, you'll be given every opportunity to succeed, and you'll be allowed to fail over and over again, unless your name's Trey Lance, but we don't need to talk about that. So you have the job security where you know he is going to be a starter early on in his NFL career. And we can just look at how impressive he has been in school. What I want to look at is going to be his adjusted yards per pass attempt, which was at 13.6. We go to 2022. The highest guy was CJ Stroud, 10.9. 2021, 13.6, but a Coastal Carolina school, playing in the Sun Belt Conference. I don't even want to count that. Then you had a MAC conference quarterback hitting 13. I mean, you had Joe Burrow at LSU in the SEC, actually at 12.5 adjusted yards per pass attempt back in 2019. Yes, Jayden Daniels had a better season than Joe Burrow from a statistical standpoint. Going over to Kyler Murray at 13 adjusted yards per pass attempt. Baker Mayfield at 12.9. Baker again, 11.1. Essentially, what we're going to do here is highlight every quarterback that has been able to hit at least 10 adjusted yards per pass attempt in a season over the past 20 years. Because if we're looking at that, we are looking at a massive sample of the quarterbacks that had the best collegiate seasons in terms of efficiency throwing the football, which you love to see, right? Now, I want to narrow this down because not only does Jayden Daniels give you that efficiency as a thrower, but at the same time, he is a rusher of the football to a massive degree. So what I wanted to look at is over the last 20 years, who are the quarterbacks that were able to have an adjusted yards per pass attempt of 10 or more, and at the same time have 650 or more rushing yards in that same season. Now, you had a couple of guys doing it twice, but you had Tim Tebow in both 2007 and 2008. You had Cam Newton in 2010, RG3 in 2011, Mariota 2013, Manziel 2013, Mariota again in 2014. Then you had Kyler, Hurts, Lance, and Jayden Daniels. Now, obviously, just looking at statistics isn't going to be able to be the only thing we do. So I want to narrow it down and bring in NFL scouting departments who determined if a player projected to be good or not at that next level based on what they saw with film. So we are going to be looking at guys that were only drafted inside the top 10 on that list, which include Cam Newton. Cam Newton at one point in Dynasty Fantasy Football was the QB1 overall. RG3 at one point in Dynasty Fantasy Football was a first-round starter pick in Superflex leagues. Marcus Mariota, one point in Dynasty Fantasy Football. I know it's crazy to say now, but Mariota was right up there. He was going at the 1-2 turn in Dynasty Superflex startup drafts. Kyler Murray, at one point was a first-round startup pick. Trey Lance, obviously Trey Lance is going to look like an outlier in this list. You're going to see Trey Lance's name multiple times. And then you have Jayden Daniels here as well. That's assuming he gets drafted inside the top 10. If he ends up falling to be a late first-round pick, if he falls to be an early second-round pick, that will change the data and it will lower his expected hit rate based off what NFL scouting departments were able to see on the film that I'm going to watch, but I'm not going to trust myself too much on because I realistically know my limitations and the limitations of pretty much anybody. But now there's a different way to look at this as well, because I really want to highlight the exact rushing upside that you have with Jayden Daniels. So what I decided to do is I decided to look over the past 15 or so years. I believe maybe we went longer than that. We went back 2008 essentially. And we looked at quarterbacks that were drafted in round 1 that also had 800 or more rushing yards in a season. So this isn't the 650 cutoff. This is taking it one step further, right? Because Jayden Daniels not only had 1,100 rushing yards this past season, he's had over 800 rushing yards now in back-to-back years. He is one of the only quarterbacks to do that on this list. We also had Trey Lance in 2019. Yes, I know we're going to have to stop talking about Lance here, but 2018, we had Kyler Murray. Lamar did it in 2015, 16, and 17. Lamar, special caliber. Deshaun Watson did it 2015. Johnny Manziel did it in 2012. Cam Newton did it in 2010. And RG3 did it in 2008. So what I wanted to do is figure out what can be the expected rushing output from Jayden Daniels at the next level. So we looked at all these quarterbacks earlier in their NFL career. I didn't want to look at their rookie season. Obviously, rookie years are going to be weird. You're going to be in and out. You don't necessarily know how many games you are playing. But starting in year 2, that should be by the time that all these guys are full-blown starters, except Trey Lance. Obviously, we're not able to look at that. Now, you have Kyler Murray, 51 rushing yards per game, year 2. Lamar Jackson, 80 rushing yards per game. Deshaun Watson, 34.5. I don't know if you want to include Manziel. Obviously, Manziel in and out. He had 25.5. I'm imagining if he's playing full games there, it's probably a little bit closer to 40, but who am I to say? Cam Newton at 46.3 and RG3 at 37.5. So if you look at this list, really the expectation, if you remove Manziel, should be hovering around mid-40s in terms of the rushing yards from a per-game perspective for Jayden Daniels in fantasy. That is absurd. You look at 40 rushing yards per game. That is going to be equivalent to 100 and I want it slightly over 100 passing yards per game from a conversion standpoint, equaling the same amount of fantasy points. And we just look at what happens when quarterbacks are able to do that in Dynasty and how hard they are to come by and how this boosts up their value. I mean, right now, looking at the quarterbacks in the expert rankings on flogfantasy.com, you have Mahomes 1, you have Allen 2, Hurts 3. This doesn't really matter. What matters is looking at the overall rankings of these guys. Kyler Murray is quarterback 9. Kyler Murray has an average expert rank of 14. Quarterback 9 at 14 overall. Brock Purdy's QB 12. He's at 26. Tua's QB 11. He's at 21. Lawrence's QB 10. He's at 14.5. Looking at these quarterbacks, if you have a pulse, if you have a starting job, you will be essentially a borderline top 2 startup pick. Throw on the fact that you have rushing upside and you are essentially a borderline round 1 guy. Look at Anthony Richardson. While I like Anthony Richardson, I would love to have him on my Dynasty Fantasy Football team because this is someone that's in a good situation. He has a stable job and he projects to have a crap ton of rushing upside. The reality is, while he looked good at points in his rookie year, we had such a small sample. We can't sit here and say Anthony Richardson's for sure a guaranteed stud any more than we could say that Jayden Daniels is a for sure guaranteed stud. But Anthony Richardson is currently valued as a round 1 startup pick. Jayden Daniels is looking at being, say, the 104, 105, maybe 106, depending on what your league's looking at. And if you look at the expert rankings right now for the 104 is an early 3rd round startup pick. The 105 is a mid 3rd round startup pick. The 106 is an early 4th round startup pick. These are all the rankings on flogfantasy.com. If you are able to get Jayden Daniels at this price point, I think you are getting an asset that profiles to be a late 1st, early 2nd round startup pick. I'm not saying I'd rank him there immediately. We have to see how the offseason plays out. We have to see him actually go borderline top 5 in the NFL draft. But you are getting that about 2 to 3 rounds after you should, where you have a significant teardrop, obviously, from the beginning of round 2 of startups to round 4 in startups. Now, the last thing that I do want to look at here is going to be a potential projected landing spot. Of course, this is really going to matter for quarterbacks as well. Now, as we pull this up, I will just go back to a name that we've seen on this list multiple times. This is the same process that had me really high on Trey Lance. All the historical data had told us this is a quarterback that is a guaranteed starter. This is a quarterback that has all the rushing upside in the world. And when you have a quarterback that's guaranteed starter and he has all the rushing upside in the world, then that's an asset that's going to be extremely valuable in Dynasty. So I went all in on Trey Lance and I crashed and burned because of it, because Trey Lance turned out to be the biggest bust of all time, which it's extremely hard to find an outlier like that in this data. So with that being said, it's always a possibility that Jayden Daniels is the next biggest bust in NFL history, okay? That is a possibility. Not saying the Niners are going to go out there and trade 3 first-round picks for him, though. But if we're looking at potential landing spots for Jayden Daniels, right now, how Draft Orders projects, you have Chicago at 1. Obviously, you don't have Daniels going at 1. Maybe Chicago trades out. We don't really know. Obviously, it's going to mix up a ton. Washington at 2. Right now, that pick's projecting out to be Drake May. A lot does change where, I mean, a lot of times in January, you're confident about which way these things are going to go, and they just go in a completely different direction. Daniels is in play at 2, as crazy as that sounds. You have New England there at 3. He's in play for New England. I would hate the New England landing spot, though. That is the spot that you have to dodge. If you are Marvin Harrison Jr., if you're one of these quarterbacks, you do not want to go to New England with the team that has one of the worst offenses in the NFL and just horrendous pieces all around. You have Arizona at 4. Obviously, Daniels wouldn't be a candidate to go to the Cardinals unless they were to trade Kyler, which, I mean, maybe is a possibility. It's a long offseason. You have the Giants at 6. That would be a potential landing spot. Not great. Tennessee at 7. That would be a potential landing spot. Not great. Atlanta at 8. That would be a great landing spot, depending on what you think of the new coaching staff. And then you have Chicago at 9. I could see that being a landing spot if Chicago were to trade out of the number 1 overall pick for another team to get Caleb Williams at 1 and then for them to take Daniels at that discount at 9. But really what we have to do is, in my mind, dodge the New England spot and we're golden. But I hope that this made sense. I hope this is going to put you on them early, and hopefully you can go out there and position yourself to go get the 104 in this year's rookie drafts. I'm definitely taking them over these secondary wide receivers like Neighbors and Dunze, at least in super flex leagues. Obviously in your one quarterback formats, he is going to be lower. And if you ever want to check out our one quarterback rankings, in addition to our super flex rankings, all on flogfantasy.com, of course. You can also find our trade calculator over there, our trade finder over there, and all our premium content. Use promo code FLOG, you get 30% off any subscription, plus yours truly will break down your Dynasty Fantasy Football team in a podcast. Find that link in the comment section and the description. But I think that's all I have for you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you again. I really do appreciate you, and really hope we get to see you out with the video later tomorrow.